Okay, this is Dr. Bishop once again. I'm going to give you an introductory lecture on Chapter 2, which has, I think it's entitled Models of Behavior, or Models or Paradigms. And basically, let me go ahead and just get started here. So, underlying all of this is the idea of how do we discover what are the various causes of abnormality. How do we want to view abnormality? And the idea eventually is if you understand it, you can intervene and treat it effectively. So historically, there have been many perspectives, paradigms, or models from which to view abnormality. And one of the key ideas with paradigms is that whatever your perspective is, in terms of what you think is causing abnormal behavior, your treatment or your intervention will follow. So the two are tied together. So this is actually from a different textbook, but it will be good. So the idea here is to present different conceptual frameworks to understand the causes of abnormal behavior. Now, what has evolved currently is to kind of integrate different perspectives rather than just go with a single perspective. So most modern day practicing clinicians and scientists use what they call a biopsychosocial model. So they look at biological factors, psychological factors, and social factors. And it's sometimes called an integrative model. Okay, so historically, one of the things that's sort of interesting, they used to, when they saw abnormal behavior, they would take, and their belief was that the person was inhabited by evil spirits. So one of the treatments was something they called trephining. And what they did was they would take something sharp and they would chip a hole in the skull of the person exhibiting the abnormal behavior. Obviously, this is like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So, but we see evidence of this. And then some of the other, they used to think that abnormal behavior was caused by people were possessed by witches or they were witches. Various perspectives have evolved historically. Now, modern day paradigms often involve the biomedical, psychoanalytic, behavioral, and humanistic, which is pretty close to what your textbook presents. The biomedical is essentially the medical model or the biological model. The psychoanalytic model has to do with Freudian psychology, but isn't really used very much anymore and has weak scientific evidence. And humanistic model has weak scientific evidence. The behavioral model and also something called the cognitive model is often used and has seems to have the greatest utility in scientific support. So the first thing to do is to recognize what is a model or what is a paradigm. So synonyms would include it's a viewpoint or a perspective, historically a school of thought like psychoanalysis, behaviorism, humanism, and so forth. In some senses, it's a theory. Also could be viewed as a template or a particular mental set, or if you adhere to it, to the point of being rigid, it could even be a religion. Some people think that some psychoanalysts it's almost psychoanalysis is like a religion. Each paradigm has a unique language, unique terminology, its own individual concepts, and often it's not well understood or in depth understood by, quote, outsiders. So if you're not a psychoanalyst, you may not get into the Oedipal complex and penis envy and all of the defense mechanisms and the intrapsychic conflicts and all of this. But whatever the model is, it influences for sure what you look for, what you look at, what is seen, what you actually perceive, and how what you see is interpreted. So it sort of, in some ways, it provides a set of spectacles, but it is also a pair of set of blinders, because what you pay attention to is sometimes you miss important stuff because you're not focusing on it. It has particular perspective on what causes abnormality, and real important, as I mentioned, it has specific perspectives on treatment. So if you believe that some kind of biological mechanism is involved in creating delusions and hallucinations and schizophrenia, that it's a brain disease, then you're going to look for, biological interventions. If you think it's whatever the abnormality is, if you think it's psychologically based, then you're going to do more psychotherapy or behavior therapy or things like that. Historically, again, there's been competition between paradigms, but as mentioned earlier, this is getting to be not the perspective, and people are adopting a broader perspective and looking at all of the paradigms together in a kind of integrative way. So the biopsychosocial model is an attempt to integrate information from all of the perspectives. I'm not going to talk about that. So what is a biological factor? So what you're talking about here is looking at, for abnormalities, genetic or hereditary influences, biochemistry, the way your body functions, the biological and chemical things that go on, and particularly neurotransmitters, which are secreted by the endocrine system and also by the terminal buttons on your neurons. Many of the medications seem to be aimed at trying to influence neurotransmitters, And then, of course, you're interested if there's some sort of abnormality in the brain structure, brain injuries, things like this, and the endocrine system, which has to do with hormones, things like that. So anything biological. Psychological factors include a person's unique psychological and learning history. So anything that would be included in that kind of Freudian perspective, which says that your environment influences you, especially when you're a young child. The behavioral perspective, which has to do with learning, basically the view that abnormal behavior is learned behavior, and if you can unlearn it and relearn it, that's one way of dealing with abnormality. And then what your thought processes are, conscious or unconscious, and there's different terminology gets associated with this. A schema, unconscious conflicts, and so forth. Then, of course, there, people who have also are influenced by social factors. So we look at the influence of parents and family, modeling, learning by observation, peers, culture. Culture makes a big difference. Ethnicity provides different perspectives. Gender, scripts associated with gender and gender conflicts. The influence of TV, music, certainly now your cell phone and computers and things like this. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I got a cute little thing here I thought you might be interested in. This sort of kind of gives you an example of how your perceptions can be hindered by certain paradigms. So the idea here is to solve this problem. And also I'll read it to you and see what you think. So what's the answer to this? I'm not in earth, nor the sun, nor the moon. You may search all the sky, I'm not there. In the morning and evening, though not at noon, you may plainly perceive me. For like a balloon, I am suspended in air. Though disease may possess me, and sickness and pain, I am never in sorrow nor gloom. Though in wit and wisdom I equally reign, I am the heart of all sin, and have long lived in vain. Yet I never shall be found in the tomb. So, what is the answer to this little brain teaser? I'll give you a minute to see if you can figure it out. Or you can just hit a pause here and I'll tell you here in a second. So, the answer to this is the letter I. So if you read it back through, you'll see that it all makes sense if you're just looking to see if I is in the word and so forth. You get fooled because you're looking for the meaning of it. So your mental set has basically blinded you to the answer. Now, knowing that, if you come back and you try another one, the beginning of eternity, the end of time and space, the beginning of every end and the end of every place, piece of cake now, because you've got the right template, the right perspective to see what's really going on. One additional thing I wanted to call your attention to was that abnormality, like car accidents, have many causes, not just one. So often, there was an accident of a boy that actually got killed off the Taylor Mill exit. He was going down the hill into Latonia. I came upon the accident just after it had occurred. But around a curve, he slid over in front of a van, and it was a head-on collision. Now, what caused that accident? I would have thought that, maybe he had bad tires. Maybe he was going too fast. It was raining. The pavement was slick. The pavement, the curve on the road there was balanced to draw him over into the center. It wasn't curved right. Maybe inexperience. Maybe he was distracted. Maybe all of the above, a few of the above. My guess is that if it hadn't been wet, and he had been going just a little bit slower, he'd be alive. But the point is that often events, especially complex events, have multiple causes. So unless you understand the details and all of the interrelationships of causes, often it's going to be very difficult to solve problems. Okay, I'm going to stop here then.